The air in my parents' dining room always felt like it was pressurized, a heavy, suffocating atmosphere designed to keep me small. I am Elena, a 33-year-old senior compliance officer for a major investment bank in Manhattan. My entire professional life is dedicated to finding the things people try to hide: the missed decimals, the offshore leaks, the subtle discrepancies that signal a crumbling foundation. I am a predator of lies. But in this room, sitting across from my mother, Lydia, and my brother, Marcus, I was just the disappointment. Pass the salt. Elena, my mother said, her voice sounding like a violin string pulled too tight. She didn't look at me. She was too busy admiring Marcus, who was holding court about his latest venture capital success. And try not to look so morose. It's a celebration. Marcus just closed a six-figure deal. Not everyone can just sit behind a desk and check boxes for a living like you do. I passed the salt in silence. For 33 years, this had been the script. Marcus was the golden child, the charismatic visionary who was always one step away from becoming the next tech mogul. I was the gray child, the one who studied too hard, worked too much, and stayed in the shadows. To my mother, my steady, high-paying career was boring, and my independence was selfishness. It's about vision. Mom, Marcus said, flashing that smile that had gotten him out of every speeding ticket and failed grade since high school. He was wearing a watch that cost more than my first car, a watch he bought with a loan from our parents' retirement fund. Elena lives in a world of rules. I live in a world of possibilities. That's why I'm taking the family to the Amalfi Coast this summer. My treat. My father, who usually stayed quiet, beamed with pride. You see, Elena, that's what a successful child does. He thinks about the family. He doesn't just hoard his paycheck in a 401k. I took a sip of water, the coldness of it the only thing keeping my temper from flaring. I knew something they didn't. 2 weeks ago, Marcus had applied for a bridge loan at the very bank where I lead the compliance department. He didn't know I worked in that specific division now. He thought his application would slide through the automated system, buoyed by his polished LinkedIn profile and fake references. But the system had flagged it. Not because of a glitch, but because the six-figure deal he was bragging about didn't exist. The documents Marcus had submitted, the ones showing his firm's revenue, were masterpieces of forgery. He had used our parents' home as collateral without their knowledge, forging my father's signature on a secondary mortgage to fund his Amalfi lifestyle. He wasn't a visionary. He was a high-stakes shoplifter, stealing from the people who worshipped him to maintain a mask of success. Actually, Marcus, I said, putting my glass down. The table went quiet. Even the clinking of silverware stopped. I saw your name on a filing at work the other day. Something about a venture growth fund. Marcus's smile didn't fade, but his eyes turned into chips of ice. A bead of sweat broke at his temple. Oh, must have been a routine thing. I work with a lot of banks, Elena. You wouldn't understand the complexity. I understood the complexity of the signature on the collateral form, I said, leaning back. It looked remarkably like Dad's handwriting. Except, Dad was in the hospital for his hip surgery on the day it was notarized. Isn't that strange? My mother slammed her napkin onto the table. Elena, how dare you? You're so jealous of your brother's success that you're accusing him of, what, crimes? This is exactly why we don't include you in things. You're toxic. I'm not jealous, Mom, I said, my voice dropping to a whisper that carried more weight than a scream. I am the one who has to decide whether to report the fraud to the authorities or let the bank foreclose on this house. Because that six-figure deal Marcus is talking about, it's a deficit. He's 3 months behind on the payments for the loan he took out in Dad's name. Marcus stood up, his chair screeching against the floor. You're lying. You've always hated me. You're just trying to ruin me because you're a miserable, lonely bean counter. I'm the bean counter, who has the original copies of the forged documents in her briefcase, I said, pointing to the hallway. And I am the one who just received the alert that you tried to transfer another $50,000 from Mom's savings account 20 minutes ago while we were waiting for the roast. The silence that followed was different this time. It wasn't the pressurized silence of my mother's disapproval. It was the hollow, terrifying silence of a building about to collapse. My father looked at Marcus, then at me. His face was gray. Marcus, what is she talking about? My house, what mortgage? Marcus didn't answer. He looked at the door. He looked at me. Then, he did the only thing a coward knows how to do. He laughed. You think you're so smart, Elena. You think you can just play God with my life. If I go down, I'm taking everything with me. I've already moved the assets. By the time your bank realizes what happened, the money will be in a shell account you can't touch. He turned to my mother. Don't listen to her, Mom. She's just trying to control us. She's always wanted to be the one in charge. Lydia looked at me, her eyes burning with a lifetime of resentment. Get out, Elena, get out of my house. I don't care what you think you found. You are not a part of this family. If Marcus says it's okay, it's okay. We don't need your rules here. I stood up. I didn't feel the sting of the rejection anymore. I felt the cold, clinical clarity of a job that needed to be finished. I picked up my briefcase from the hallway. The bank doesn't wait for family meetings. Mom, I said, looking her in the eye for the last time. They wait for payments. And since Marcus just admitted to moving the assets, you have exactly 12 hours before the fraud division hits the execute button on the foreclosure. I walked out the front door and into the cool night air. I sat in my car, my hands gripping the steering wheel. I could hear the shouting starting inside the house, the sound of the golden child finally being forced to show his hands. I opened my laptop. I didn't call the police. I didn't call my boss. I opened the bank's internal kill switch portal, the one reserved for high-level fraud cases. Marcus thought he had moved the money to a shell account I couldn't touch. He forgot that I was the one who wrote the compliance algorithms for those very accounts. He hadn't moved the money away from me. He had moved it directly into my jurisdiction. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly that the leather groaned under my palms. My knuckles stark white against the dark interior of the car. He is my brother. He is the boy I grew up with, the one I shared 1,000 childhood secrets with, the one my parents pinned every single one of their hopes on. He is the golden child of our family. My stomach knotted, hot tears finally broke and spilled down my face, and my breath caught in a jagged, hollow sob. How can I do this to him? How can I be the one to send my own brother to a federal prison and leave my parents with nothing? But he stood in that dining room and laughed while he admitted to stealing our father's home. He reached into our mother's savings while she was serving him dinner. He betrayed the very people who worshipped him. He struck first. I had no choice. I wiped my eyes with a sudden, icy resolve. The disappointing daughter was gone. The senior compliance officer had taken over. I opened my laptop on the passenger seat, the glow of the screen reflecting in my eyes. I didn't need a warrant to look at the internal logs of my own department. I navigated through the bank's high-security firewall, entering my credentials with a rhythmic, clinical precision. Marcus thought he was clever. He thought that by moving the funds into a shell account, he was hiding them in a digital abyss. But he had used the same routing transit number associated with the bridge loan application he defiled at my bank. I watched the digital trail bloom across the screen, a series of rapid-fire transfers, designed to confuse a standard auditor. But I wasn't standard. I saw the $50,000 he'd just swiped from Mom's account hit a secondary offshore entity, then bounce back into a domestic holding LLC he'd registered in Delaware. I see you, Marcus, I whispered to the empty car. I didn't just freeze the account. I initiated a Reg GG hold, a federal-level freeze used for suspicious gambling or fraudulent business activities. Because I was a lead in the compliance division, I had the authority to flag the account for immediate manual review by the fraud department. I appended the forged collateral documents and the medical records of my father's hip surgery to the file. Then, I did something I had never done in my decade-long career. I triggered the acceleration clause on the fraudulent loan. Usually, the bank gives 30 days to rectify a discrepancy. But for active fraud involving identity theft of a senior citizen, the system is designed to strike instantly. I sent a single, encrypted email to the bank's legal counsel, BCCing the local district attorney's white-collar crime unit. The evidence was undeniable. Marcus wasn't just a bad businessman, he was a felon. I sat in my car for another hour, watching the lights in my parents' house flick on and off. The shouting hadn't stopped. I could see shadows pacing past the dining room windows, my mother's frantic gestures, my father's slumped shoulders. I felt a pang of grief for the family I never had, the one that might have loved me if I was unso boring and rigid, but I realized that my rigidity was the only thing that could save what was left of their lives. At 7:00 a.m. the next morning, I returned to the house. I didn't knock, I used my old key. The living room looked like a war zone. My mother was huddled on the sofa, her eyes red and swollen. My father was sitting at the table, staring at a stack of papers Marcus had tried to burn in the fireplace, the evidence of the second mortgage. Marcus was gone. His car wasn't in the driveway. He left, my father said, his voice sounding old and defeated. He took his bags and left in the middle of the night. He said he was going to fix it. He said you were a monster for trying to ruin him. He didn't fix it, Dad, I said, sitting across from him. He tried to run, but the accounts are frozen. Every cent he took from Mom is being held in escrow, and the bridge loan has been flagged for criminal investigation. My mother looked up, her face twisted with a mixture of hatred and desperation. Are you happy now, Elena? You've destroyed your brother. You've put him in jail. Is this the rules you wanted so badly? I saved your house, Mom, I said, my voice as steady as a dial tone, because I flagged it as fraud immediately. The bank has agreed to set aside the second mortgage. They're pursuing Marcus for the lost funds, not you. If I hadn't acted, the sheriff would have been here in 90 days to put you on the street. I don't care about the house, she screamed. I care about my son. Your son stole your life, I replied. And I'm the disappointment who just bought it back for you. The legal fallout was a tidal wave. Marcus was arrested 48 hours later at JFK Airport, trying to board a flight to a country with no extradition treaty. He was charged with grand larceny, identity theft, and 4 counts of bank fraud, because I had documented the trail so perfectly. There was no plea deal that didn't involve him serving at least 5 years in a federal facility. My father eventually understood. He thanked me in private, his hand shaking as he signed the papers to put the house into a protected trust that Marcus could never touch. My mother, however, never forgave me. To her, a golden child who steals is still better than a gray child who tells the truth. She moved into a small apartment near the prison to be closer to him. Using the small stipend I provided her every month, the same stipend she called tainted, I went back to Manhattan. I kept checking the boxes. I kept looking for the decimals that didn't add up, but I did it with a new sense of purpose. I realized that my boring life was a fortress, and my rules were the only thing that kept the world from falling apart. I spent my next birthday alone in my quiet, perfect apartment. There was no salt to pass, no shouting, and no pressurized air. There was only the sound of a woman who finally knew her own value. Now I live in peace and they finally learned their lesson.